This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. For a free 10-day unlimited trial, visit lynda.com/MacVoices. And by the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter to stay up to date on all the MacVoices news. Subscribe from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Welcome to the MacJury on MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is another one of our first weekend with shows. This time we get the first weekend with iOS 9. And it seems like we may be doing a lot of these in the next couple of weeks because it seems like Apple keeps bringing things out on an almost weekly basis. So I'm looking forward to having a lot of great conversations and some new toys to play with. But this time we're going to talk about iOS 9, and I've got a great panel for you, and so I think it's time that we find out who's here before we get going. We should mention that we're recording this on the day of the great Skype crash disaster thing, so at least as of this moment, one of our panelists can't do video, but he's here in audio and spirit. So with that, I will introduce you the static member of our group, Mr. John Grzeskowiak. John, it's great to have you. I wish I could say it's great to see you, but it's great to have you.
Well, great to be back, Chuck, and that's all right. You know what I look like, so.
Yeah. And I will drop in a picture so everybody else knows. But you're not exactly a stranger to MacVoices. We've talked a number of times before.
Yes, we have. It's always a learning experience.
Absolutely. So tell us about RadTech and what's going on right now.
So for anyone that doesn't know, RadTech is we design, manufacture, and distribute a wide variety of products with the intention of making your digital experience a little bit better. Things have been going fairly well here. We're hard at work on some new products for the recently announced Apple Gear. So you will start seeing that. In fact, our Twitter and Facebook crew may have already sort of teased some, 3D mock-ups of some stuff that we're planning on doing. So other than that, things are good.
Good. And John and I usually get to have a conversation at CES every year. So if you want to go back and look in the archives, you can see some of the products they've talked about for the last few years. It's always interesting to see what they're coming up with. And RadTech doesn't just apply to Macs, though. You kind of cut across everything. We
do. I mean, we have a lot of, carrying products, luggage, and things like that. So that's sort of universal in that regard. We do, one of our big lines is anti-glare and transparent protective films for displays. So, that runs the gamut. We do those for, small handheld devices all the way up to large televisions and monitors. We even have done some for windows and shops in New York City and other places. Big plate glass window, got a lot of glare, so we've done films for applications like that. So, yeah.
Well, and John gets the award for the making the most effort because he's joining in on this by iPhone, which is the only way he could get on Skype. So thank you for the extra effort. Really appreciate it.
Hey, no sweat.
Next up, Mr. Chuck Tournous. Chuck, it's great to have you back, especially with iOS 9 being here.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Just to let everybody know where you can find me these days, I'm doing most of my writing for Macworld at macworld.com. I still poke my head in at the Mac Observer every once in a while. You can find me on Twitter at Chuck Tournous. My own personal tech blog, it's become a blog now, I have to face that, I guess, at randomaccess.com, 2 M's, 2 C's, 2 S's. And then every once in a while, I'll talk about the intersection of high tech and high adventure at trailcamper.com.
Is it painful to admit that it's become a blog, Chuck?
It is. Well, Random Access has been around, it's over 20 years now.
Wow.
I think 1994 is when it first started. And at that time, the intent of it was to be more of a full-blown news outlet. I have a journalism background, and there wasn't really what there is now on the Mac web. So There were a lot of stories, daily posts, analytics. I had writers who did some investigative pieces. The real world kind of crept in, and once I started having kids and mortgages to pay for, you needed the real job. So things became less frequent there, and I started writing for other publications. But in the back of my head, it was still a journalistic endeavor, not a blog. Blog was kind of a dirty word for me back then.
Okay. Sometime we'll have a debate as to whether blogs are journalistic endeavors, but we won't do that here.
Oh, that'd be a good debate.
Yeah. Actually, I can think of a panel right here, right now.
Yeah.
So it's good to have you as always.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Third member of our panel, for his first time serving on the MacJury, is Dr. Robert Carter. Robert, it's great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, Chuck. Thanks for having me. I do appreciate it. I am a podcaster. I do an Apple-oriented podcast called the Tech Doctor Podcast, where we focus primarily on helping people get the most out of their Apple technology who are using accessibility. We focus mostly on VoiceOver. As most people know, Apple's done a fabulous job of making their products accessible to everyone. And so we take them at their word and push it to the max and help people do all the things that everyone does with their iPhones and iPads and Macs, typically using the VoiceOver screen reader that's built into every single Apple device. So that's the Tech Doctor Podcast at drcarter.com, dr-carter.com, where we cover all those things. And I personally have been an Apple enthusiast ever since the early 1980s when I started using the Apple II. It actually got me all the way through graduate school, including my dissertation. So I love the Apple II, and it's nice that we have all these fancy new products to work with these days here in the next century. So it's very cool, actually.
Could I offer one suggestion about your podcast?
Sure.
Find a different kind of co-host, partner kind of thing. That Allison Sheridan is, she's just dragging it down.
She's trouble.
She's nothing but trouble.
Well, we need to clarify that, because actually my co-host is not actually Allison Sheridan, although she has been on the podcast a number of times, and we've done the best we can. No, we love Allison. She's fabulous. But my co-host her name is actually Allison Hartley. She also lives in California, so I guess she's pretty much as guilty as Allison Sheridan, actually.
No chance.
Okay.
No chance. It seemed like every time I looked up, all I saw was Allison. So maybe Allison Hartley, my apologies. Allison Sheridan, take it as it is. So guys, iOS 9, we got this Friday. I'm not sure when you all updated. I will start out by saying I did something that I never do, and that is I updated all my iOS devices probably within about an hour of the release. I wasn't seeing anything screaming that people were being bricked right out of the gate, and so I updated, and I have not had a single hiccup. Is anybody else sharing in that experience?
I haven't had any hiccups myself, but I've heard from a lot of people who have. And the reports seem to be common enough that it makes me think there must be something going on, but they're also different enough to make me think that they aren't really widespread, deep-rooted problems with the OS itself. So it may depend on what you upgraded from, what you had on your machine, whether you did a full backup and restore, all that voodoo that we thought we got rid of once we left SCSI devices, but still seems to keep finding us. But generally, I think it's been a very good update.
I've only updated my iPhone. I haven't done the iPad yet, but I did it over the lunch hour actually, and did it using the old-fashioned plug the USB cable into iTunes and did a complete backup and then updated that way. And I have had no problems to speak of. Really, I like iOS 9. It's got some interesting features. It was a little bit fascinating today, Chuck, when I looked at an email from you on my iPhone. It offered to pull that information from the email and add you to my contacts list. And it seems like it did a much better job than the data detectors used to do, just the way that it presented all the information and the ease of doing it. I think some real progress has been done there. So it's kind of cool, actually.
That's good to hear. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's exactly the way I upgraded too, is I plugged in both my devices to my Mac, did the backups just because I'm paranoid and I want to back up just in case anything would go wrong. And that seemed to be fine. The over-the-air stuff was where it seemed to be a challenge, and I just wonder if that's because Apple's servers got slammed so hard. So
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, everybody's trying to download it over the air just at the hour it comes out.
yeah. John, since you're joining us via iPhone, are you running iOS 9 on that device?
I am not running it on this phone, and my experience was actually rather bittersweet. The phone that I did upgrade to iOS 9 is in the process of, well, I've already rolled it back to 8.4.1, and it's restoring from a backup right now. But yeah, so my situation is probably not what the majority of people are doing. So I'm still running 10.6.8 on a 17-inch MacBook Pro. And the iPhone of choice for me is the 5S, although I do have all of them. And I have newer Macs, obviously. We pretty much have everything here. But my daily driver is 10.6.8. And that's primarily due to my workflow as an engineer, the software I use. The 5S is my phone of choice because I just prefer the smaller compact size. But so let me kind of lay out my experience. So I always back up. I always quit all apps and double reboot the phone, and have never really had a problem in the past. But this time, iTunes, plug the phone in, offers to upgrade to 9. So went ahead and did it. And then like out of the blue, when the update's finished and the phone tries to reconnect, I get the message that says this version of iTunes will not work with this version of iOS. So that pretty much left me out in the cold on that machine. And, that's something that I just can't deal with, because I'm always shooting images and little video clips, and I'm exchanging those with lots of different vendors and things like that. And I need to have a copy on my Mac. So I need that ability to, be able to, upload photos from the phone to iPhoto and then, sync them, with the Mac. So because I lost all of that, I had to revert back. But in the interim on the 5S, I did note that, the performance had slowed down significantly, so that was, I don't know what you guys are running iOS hardware wise, but on the 5S, it was not good. Everything seemed to lag about a half a second behind what I was doing. So, texting, I'm typing and it's a half second before the words appear, things like that. So, yeah. I'm back to 8.4.1 on my bread and butter, machine right now.
I'm on a 5S too, and I hadn't had those issues. Everything seems to be very smooth and like butter for me so far, happily. And in fact, the reason I've been running the iOS 9 beta for quite a while, and the reason I did it is because iOS 8 had become so problematic for me, battery life issues in particular. So I felt like I didn't have much to lose to try the beta. I don't normally run a beta on a production machine, but like I said, I didn't think I had much to lose at that point.
Right. I will say that I did notice that 9 did restore the runtime lost with iOS 8, and that was a nice thing. But again, because of the other issues, I had to roll back. But I did use it a full weekend, so I only reverted back just a couple of hours ago, actually.
We should probably mention that this time, for the first time, Apple made some changes in how the over-the-air update was delivered, because there were a lot of issues last time where people, especially with 16 gigabyte phones, didn't have enough room to install and unpack the update and install it on top of all the apps that they had. So it's a smaller update to start with, and iOS 9 will actually delete apps from your phone temporarily in order to make room for the OS to be installed, and then it puts those apps back afterwards. So I thought that was a nice touch for those of us who aren't as smart as you guys to hook your iPhone up to your computer via USB to do those upgrades.
Just got to trust that iCloud connection, man.
Yeah.
That's all.
One of these days.
So, well, John, at least you were smart and you did the backup, so you had something you could roll back to.
Always, yeah. I mean, I just have learned that over the years.
Yeah. Robert, did you do the back? Well, I know you said you connected, but you did do a backup. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. I'd always do the encrypted backup, so you get your passwords and your email settings and everything back over. But I didn't actually have to restore. Now, when I get my new 6S Plus on Friday, it'll be an interesting decision to make whether I just do a restoration of this backup or obviously later backup, or will I do kind of reinstall things from scratch and get rid of some of those apps that I haven't used in a year or two. I'm sort of thinking at this point I'm actually going to do the restore from the backup first, see how it all works, and then if I have trouble, do the much more difficult task.
Mm. I got to say, even when I'm doing, I do the full backup and restore, but one of the things I started doing a couple of releases ago is I'll go through my phone and delete the apps that I haven't used in a while. Sort of a self-purge, makes things cleaner to start with, but it also has a nice benefit of making the upgrade a lot faster, because then as you're doing the upgrade, it doesn't have to deal with all that stuff that's still on your phone.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. I'm going to take us in just a little different direction since we were talking about it a touch, but one thing that I did in the last 24 hours is, since Apple changed iCloud pricing with the release of iOS 9, I decided for the first time to buy some more storage and do an iCloud backup. Up to this point, I've just been plugging in the phone, keeping a backup on the Mac. And that so far has gone very, very smoothly. And I'm thinking about doing a restore from the cloud to what will be my new iPhone 6S Plus come Friday. Anybody else find that what have you, I should phrase it this way, what have has been your position on iCloud up to this point with storage and backing up to the cloud?
Well, Chuck, I'll say, we do service here, so we do that a lot for customers, and it's always worked very well. So, I mean, we've taken a lot of customers from their old phone to their new phone and, used iCloud to back everything up. And I tell you, for a while, it was actually probably the best thing to do, because it retained all your folder structure and, where the apps were on your various screens, where sometimes restoring from a backup in iTunes on a computer would not. So I definitely give the iCloud, restore 2 thumbs up.
That's good to hear.
I've always had good luck with it, except for once. And one time, for some reason, my iCloud backup got corrupted somehow, and really my iTunes data was not valid. No matter what I did, it was just showing up sometimes it would show songs 2 or 3 times, things like that, but the songs actually weren't there 2 or 3 times, but the database was corrupt. And I went through a lot of different trial and error things with an Apple engineer, and finally just ended up deleting everything and restoring again from scratch. And you're able to obviously do that now, because you can so easily download everything that you've purchased through iTunes. And unfortunately, I had a backup of things I hadn't purchased, so I was good to go. But I've only had that problem once, and that's been a couple of years ago. I think it's great now, actually.
Good to hear. Chuck, how about you? Because you've sort of implied that you didn't do a backup ahead of time.
No, I did do a full backup and restore, but on my local computer. I've never done an iCloud backup. I've never really seen the point of it for my circumstances. I have multiple backups of my computer. So anything, when I back up my iOS devices on the computer, they in turn get backed up when I back up the rest of the computer. I don't really foresee the need to back up anything when I'm not near my computer. So that wasn't a real issue. And I have big capacity iOS devices, so I would need a whole lot of iCloud storage in order to do that. And maybe I'm just old-fashioned, but I like the idea of having all my stuff stored locally, speed of USB over, downloading it and things like that. And I generally don't use Apple's iCloud storage all that much anyway. I run my own server, so I have an open source sort of Dropbox style system on it that gives me basically unlimited cloud storage, and that's where I put all my stuff. So I really only store the the iApps, Pages, Keynote, things like that. Those are the only things that I really store on my iCloud. And I had the 20 gigabyte plan, which just got bumped up to 50. And that's enough for what I do for documents. And then I'll just leave my device backups on the local drive.
But now the apps don't use up your iCloud storage space, do they?
Oh, yeah.
Just the data, I thought.
Oh, right, the data, yeah. But the
apps
I have
themselves,
a lot of documents, that winds up taking a lot of data.
Right.
Okay, so let's get into iOS 9 itself. And I think the best way to do this is going to be ask you what your favorite feature, or top one or two features are from your perspectives that you like or that you found the most useful, because that's always the way it is. Those are what rise to the top. You had your eye on something and you wanted to go try it. Robert, how about if we start with you?
Well, I am loving Siri in iOS 9. I find it to be very fast for me, very responsive. I love the fact that Siri's gotten a lot smarter. You can ask questions that Siri wouldn't have been able to answer before. I hesitate to call her he or she. I think it's crazy. But anyway, it sounds like a she every time he says something to me. Anyway, I'm really loving Siri at this point.
Okay, that's good. That's an obvious thing that I think a lot of people are enjoying. John?
I'll second that. I mean, I think Siri is probably the most improved thing. I'll tell you about some things I didn't like. I didn't like the app screen, the double tap the home button, see your running apps, the leaved effect. I just feel like that took more fiddling, therefore, took more time to sort of, get to the app you wanted. I also have been seeing this move by Apple and iOS towards these, ever smaller tap targets. And, I've seen, more of those in iOS 9. And so I don't know. There's part of me that really wishes that Tim Cook would, bring back Scott Forstall, because I felt like he really got it, going to a flat design is one thing, but, making the tap targets smaller and the way a lot of the controls have lost their sort of, at a glance identification as a a
and we get back our felt in Game Center too.
Well, hey, for some things that's not bad, but I'd gladly take the felt to get the drop shadows back on buttons and things like that, and to not crowd the tap targets. For example, I notice now, let's say you're in the Stocks app and you click an article and you read it. Up in the upper left-hand corner, there's a little, back to Stocks app control, and it is just a few pixels away from the little, reader icon if you want to, if you're on a web page, and you want to see it in the reader view. So extremely difficult to sort of, differentiate between the two. So it requires a more dedicated, placement of your finger. And, that's something that Apple classically was very good about. In fact, they really wrote the book on, UI design. So to see some of those things creeping in really, since iOS 7, as a guy who's an engineer that, I do a lot of UI stuff here for the RadTech site and, some other sites that we maintain. Just, not good in my opinion. I just sort of hate to see that getting away from these human interface guidelines that, Apple developed to such a high degree. But I talk to other people, especially young people. They don't seem to mind too much, and so I always have to weigh out my feelings versus other people's. But I do know I work with a lot of other designers, and they feel the same way about that.
Yeah, all you kids get off of John's lawn.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to say I'm with you on the application switcher thing. Maybe I'll get used to it. I like the idea that it's using up my nice large screen. The overlapping lets me see more things, so I don't have to just go, skip one left, one right. I can, maybe go a couple. but it also makes it a little bit harder, I think, sometimes to hit it and swipe up and kill an app. So I'm split on that. I haven't quite decided. Chuck, how about you? What are some of your favorite thing or things?
So John mentioned one of them that I like because it's used throughout the operating system, and that's the back to little, can't call it an icon to John's point, but the back to button, that when an app leads you to someplace else, so a Safari link takes you to Twitter or vice versa, you can just instantly go right back to the app that you were at. I do agree it's a little hard to tap at some point. Hopefully Apple will get better with the implementation of it, but I love the idea of it. I think it's a real time saver. The other one that I like, maybe a little controversial, and I only started loving it the last few days, and that's content blocker support. And for a long time, as a person who produces content, I wanted to make sure that I supported the sites that I loved by reading their ads. I never installed the ad blockers on the desktop, but I think the advertising has gotten to the point where it's so obtrusive and so obnoxious and gets in your way to such an extent that it's time for content blockers. And I've been trying a couple of them out right now. Crystal and One Block, I think, are the names so far. Peace was out for a little bit, but then Marco Arment pulled that, I think, the day after he released it. But they make the difference in the speed of the mobile web was just phenomenal. It was shockingly fast, just an incredible difference. And I feel for the sites that have not put those obnoxious ads. I try to whitelist them when I can, although I don't think that's going to be a real predominant action out in the public. But hopefully, this will be a wake-up call for advertisers, and the good will float to the top and figure out a way to support themselves by their content. But I think it's something whose time has come.
Yeah, so the Google AdWords, especially, I think they're the biggest violators of usability. You're scrolling through a website, and suddenly you come across this ad which takes up about 2/3 of the screen, and you can almost like not touch it. So right. I know we've all tapped those ads inadvertently, and spawns another web page, and sometimes repeatedly. I mean, I've done it sometimes 2-3 times in a row, and it's frustrating. And right. That's bad. The problem is, I think, and I'm not on either side. I am on the side to get rid of things like that are kind of take up so much space. But companies are advertising, and Google's the biggest game in town, and they really don't have any say over how Google presents those ads. It is an unfortunate thing.
But they have a say on which companies that they allow to put ads on their sites, and whether it's the DoubleClicks or the Googles or whatever. It's gotten to the point where it's like playing whack-a-mole in order to try to read your content. It's almost comical the way that things just pop up and slide over and go right over the content that you're trying to read with right. little tiny X's to get rid of it. That, to your point earlier, John, it's hard to hit, and you wind up in the App Store or another website. Right. You never know where. And it's not only, it used to be you stay away from bad websites and you're not going to deal with this issue. But it's now things like the Wall Street Journal and,
right.
the New York Times and major websites that are utilizing these really obnoxious, intrusive ads.
Right.
And
so the property owner they're allowing the ads on their site, and they're giving them these big, holes in which to pop them into. Yeah. So totally agree. Yeah. So that's where they need to specify smaller areas if they can. I mean, I'm not sure. Chuck, you have advertising on your site, right? Do you have say in, what kind of dimensions you give to? Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
because I'm on the other side of the fence.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I have two specific spots on the website where their ads. Some are, the ones on the sidebar are from sponsors of the show, and then I have an Amazon ad at the top, and that's pretty much it. And so. Some of the sponsors feed me code, and others just give me a static GIF. let's not get into that. That then you link to a specific link on their site. So I've really tried intentionally to stay away from that. Obviously, there are times that if somebody feeds you some code, you're not quite sure what they might be throwing at you, but nobody is throwing. I guarantee you, nobody is throwing anything that's popping up at you, because I've absolutely avoided that.
Yeah. Now, is your site, is it responsive? In other words, is it, like on mobile? Is it a different version on mobile? Okay.
Not yet. It's working on that, but not just yet.
Yeah. So therein is the crux of the issue.
Right. And there'll be some issues. Robert, how about you? Have you played with ad blockers at all?
I haven't yet. I'm really aware, though, of one of the things that Chuck said, which was it's so interesting that in the demos that I've seen and heard the last couple of days, people are finding the speed so much more incredible without the ads there. And no matter which side of this you're on, it's surely got to be precipitating some discussions, because that faster browsing experience is bound to become very popular, and that's going to force something to happen. I would just bet. It sure seems like it.
Sure.
Yeah, I have to start to wonder if the net result is going to be maybe a decrease in ads, in the number of ads, so that you aren't going to have to worry about the publishers won't have to worry about the content blockers, and therefore the speeding up will occur, and you're more likely to go to that site because it's so sped up.
I think that would be a lovely outcome. I'm more of a cynic than you are, though, I think. I think what we're going to see is sort of a war for a little bit, and a lot of leapfrogging. So some of the sites that are being impacted by the ad blockers are now refusing to load if they sense that you're running an ad blocker. So they're saying, in order to read this content, go back, turn off your ad blocker, and then come back.
Gauntlet has been thrown down. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. So there's going to be cat and mouse for a while. I worry that the response is going to be trying to beat the current ad blockers and wind up with equally obnoxious ads, rather than Chuck's well-reasoned and thoughtful answer, whereby let's just serve better ads.
It's a complicated war, though, from a psychological perspective, because it's so fascinating to me that Marco Arment took the trouble to develop an app and then felt so bad about it, pulled it from the App Store. And so, wow, even one can't agree within oneself. It's just fascinating, isn't it?
Sometimes, when you take a step back and consider everything, we've all been there before, right? I mean, we've changed our opinions on things when you learn more. But, what about the way ads are done in apps? You've got the, 30 pixels tall at the bottom, or maybe it's 50 pixels, and, the content just kind of switches there. It doesn't get in your way when you're using the app. I mean, it's kind of anchored at the bottom there. I wonder if that's the answer,
Chuck, it's funny you said, because I don't know that I have this idyllic vision of things. It just, I think what's going to happen is that I'm going, if I'm running an ad blocker and I go to a site that tells me I shouldn't be running an ad blocker, I think that's going to incite me a little bit. I think it's going to, it cause me to say, you know what, if you're trying to exercise that kind of heavy-handed control, I'm just not going to bother anymore.
I'm with you.
I mean, you better have some really great content, as opposed to finding out some other way to, whether it's less obtrusive advertising or something else. But
right, because that feels less like advertising and more like extortion to me.
Exactly. And I think, if I remember correctly, I saw a shot of CNET that was the example that had said, you please turn off our ad blocker so we can, send you our content.
Right, so we can play whack-a-mole for a little while.
Yeah.
I think CNET was one, and I think the Wall Street Journal was another.
Yeah, and that's not going to go down well.
And the whole cat and mouse thing, I mean, I'm sure that they're going to figure out, they're going to look at what the ad blockers are looking at to determine if it's an ad, and they're going to one-up them, and it's going to be this continual, back and forth. Wow.
Yeah, I agree. But I think the game is on in a way it hasn't been before.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that Apple decided to put this in and it has really raised the level of awareness, because ad blockers, to one degree of effectiveness or another, have been around on the desktop for a while. I know I personally just never kind of bothered. It was just,
Right.
I just never took the time. The mobile web, though, seem to be more obtrusive there.
Definitely.
And therefore, you want to take the time to install a blocker.
Yeah, and you're dealing with a smaller space, so ads seem more intrusive, even if they're not. Maybe because you're dealing with a little bit of a space where one ad can really screw up your experience.
Yeah,
Exactly.
It's going to get emotional, though, because I saw a tweet today from, I assume, someone who's not much of an Apple fan, who said Apple just introduced the end of the free internet. So it's just interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
that is interesting.
Good point. That's a good point.
But was it free in the first place? Because it was costing us time, effort, privacy, security, a lot of those things. So I would argue with that person, that nameless person.
I don't know who the tweet came from.
Yeah. That you may not have felt like you were paying for it, but once again, you're the product.
Yeah. Well, and the sad thing to me is I want good advertising. I want to be helped to discover things that I'm interested in. If I'm researching something, I would welcome an ad that says, here, this was a highly reviewed product, and isn't this cool? But you have to be smarter about it. And I think the trouble that we got into is because advertisers got lazy. And rather than deliver us quality, they delivered us, with a hammer over the head.
Yeah. Today's edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. Get a full free 10-day trial at lynda.com/macvoices. I could spend pretty much every information spot for lynda.com telling you about the great new courses they're adding, because they're always adding great new courses. In-depth courses, courses for tech, business, personal development, video production, photography, and much more. Courses like problem solving for web professionals, which is interesting even if you're not a web professional. Teamwork fundamentals, because everyone has to work in teams sooner or later. Exploring Photoshop, mastering curves. Just one of so many great Photoshop titles. Foundations of IT security, core concepts, for those wanting to get into IT security. I can think of a couple companies who have been in the news recently who could really have used this. Media training, a course I wish every single person who ever worked a trade show booth would watch, rather than having to go look for someone with media training. Or designing icons for the web, because an eye-catching icon can make all the difference in the perception and success of a product. Those are just a few of the very latest titles in lynda.com's ever-growing library of great training titles that can teach you something about just about anything. You can watch what you want, when you want. And with lynda.com's iOS app, you can watch where you want by downloading courses to your iPhone or iPad. No internet connection necessary. You should really think about joining lynda.com and learning something new. Right now, by visiting lynda.com/macvoices, you can give it a try for a full 10 days of unlimited viewing, unlimited topics, free. Just sign up and start watching. Any course, any subject, new or old, it's yours for the viewing. At the end of 10 days, you will realize just how much you've come to rely on lynda.com as a place to go not only to learn new skills, but also to improve existing talents. That's lynda.com/macvoices for your 10 free days of learning. Do it right now and learn something new today. Thanks to lynda.com for their support of Mac Voices. We could go on the ad blocker thing for a long time, but one thing I'm surprised to hear nobody mention, because I spend quite a bit of time over the weekend with my iPad enjoying all the variations of split screen and picture-in-picture and what I think it's the right phrase is slide over. Is that I haven't gotten all the nomenclature down, but the first thing I noticed was on Friday, man, I was downloading a lot of updates, and I did it again today. But at the same time, I found so many of the apps that I really like and use are supporting these things now. So, I was having video playing when I was doing other things and, want to see what was over in that other app, pull it over to the side, or want to move something back and forth. This is just such a long time coming, and at least from my experience so far, it's really well done.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be even more useful when the iPad Pro starts to ship. Because then essentially you have, as they showed in the demo, if you put the iPad Pro in landscape, you basically have two portrait regular iPads next to each other. So you really do have two full windows to work with the slide over.
It'll give a boost to the iPad, I think. It's a pretty big update.
Yeah. John, you were talking about how you saw such a slowdown, and Chuck, I think you said that your experience was more butter-like. How about, it may have been smooth, but did you notice it? Did you feel like it was any faster?
Oh boy. I don't really think I noticed much of a lag in iOS 8 other than keyboards. So third-party keyboards I thought were very laggy in iOS 8. I think they're much better in iOS 9. So to that extent, at least, yeah, iOS 9 is a faster experience to me.
And that was on the 5S, you said?
Yep, 5S.
Yeah.
Now, I've got a 6, and I just felt I got a 6 and an iPad Air 3, and it just felt snappier. You know, it nothing that I can really put my finger on except to say just little, you know how we all have those little rat trails that we run, you know, around our apps. And it just felt like I was going around that maze faster and maybe just a little easier. So I just love that.
Well, I think that's one of the very smart things that Apple's done over the past couple updates now is to concentrate less on shiny new features and more on really tweaking the under the hood performance. And you're seeing that on both the desktop and the iOS side, I think. And to me, it's really starting to bear fruit.
I do have to say, Chuck, you and John have created a tremendous dilemma for me because my wife has an iPhone 5. And one person says butter and one person says, oh, it slowed down tremendously. And so do I dare update this iPhone 5 for her or not? This is going to be an interesting question.
Well, let me tell you a little story. There's another employee here with a 5S, a 16 gigabyte. Mine is the 64. He managed to get the download on Friday super quick, you know, and his immediate comment was, hey, this feels snappier. But by today, you know, I was talking about the slowdowns I was seeing, and he said, you know, I'm seeing the same thing too. But yet, you know, that first day he was like, oh, this is great. You know, so I don't know. It's interesting, you know, our perceptions of.
I think I shall not rush.
Yeah.
And definitely make a backup just in case. Right?
And maybe, you know, read some comments. I mean, I think a helpful thing is the Apple discussion boards, you know, see what folks are saying. And there's a lot of good sites out there that, you know, they're going to be actually doing, you know, scientific tests, you know, and they'll time things. And
as I understand it, Chuck, though, all likelihood, I would not be able to, at least not easily, back her back down to iOS 8.
Correct. Once Apple stops signing iOS 8,
Exactly.
you won't be able to do that. Yeah, and they tend to do that just a few days after the release of a new OS.
Yeah, you never know how long that's going to be, you know.
And I have to admit, I forgot you were talking about iOS 8. Yeah.
They're still signing 8.4.1, you know, because I did it today.
So it's going to be a gamble. We'll see. Maybe there will be a new iPhone 6S in her future.
That's one way to get it, right?
Yeah, that's one way to get it.
Yeah.
How about other features, guys? Things that really punched your button or that you experimented with and enjoyed and felt like are worth talking about?
I really like the new Spotlight features, and I'm really pleased to see things like 1Password now be able to let you just enter one of your IDs into Spotlight, and 1Password brings it up and logs you into the site. Things like that are really nice, I think.
Yeah, I do like the feature in you know, Spotlight search where you see like your, you know, four, I guess, depending on the orientation, you know, your several, you know, most recently accessed apps. So that is kind of nice, you know.
Yeah, and I like that, and sort of a larger issue of the smartness and the predictive nature of iOS. So I think at this point, it's not necessarily even just your four most recently used apps. If you use a certain app at a certain time of the day, that's the one that's going to start to show up in your suggestions if you do the search at that time of the day.
Every time I plug in my headphones, Overcast shows up for me because I use it a lot to listen to podcasts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of predictiveness in things, even where iOS will now, if you get a phone call that's not in your contacts, it'll go through your mail. And if there's if that is that phone number in an email, it'll say, not sure, but this may be Chuck Joyner calling you here.
Does that... We're having so many discussions about privacy and things, and Apple seems to be one of those that really likes that. But does the idea that your phone is sifting through your mail to make those connections, are we all comfortable with that? I know, Robert, you said that you were happy with it finding Mike or offering to make a contact out of an email I sent you. Any privacy concerns here?
I was happy with that, yeah. But there's a little part of me, and I guess, that's not a huge deal to me if it's going through my email, as long as it's not going up to the cloud and retrieving some or sending some data or whatever. But I'm a little cautious about things like that, honestly.
Yeah, I've put my trust in Apple at this point. They tell me that all this stuff is happening on my phone and the data is not getting sent anywhere, and I believe them because Apple is using privacy as a big selling point these days.
Yeah, I believe them too.
So they're making sure all of that data is locked down and not shared other places. So I'm cool with it, and it makes my life easier. So go for it.
Same question as relates to Always On Siri. And I realized that we already had Always On Siri because, at least in theory, Siri has been listening, to everything being said through my watch. Yep. Now it in theory is listening to everything being said directly through my phone.
Yeah.
I personally have no problem with it, but I know there are people out there that do seem to worry a bit about it.
Yeah, but the only thing it's recognizing is "Hey Siri." It's not like it's transcribing everything that you're saying. It's just waiting for that key phrase to activate. So I don't know. I could be wrong, but I don't think that's a privacy issue.
I think with it being always on, like it's going to be in the new phones, if you turn it on, it would have driven me crazy if they hadn't implemented the voice training feature that lets it only hopefully recognize your own voice. I don't want, someone else in the room to say, "Hey Siri," and that triggered my phone. So I'm glad they took that step, honestly.
Yep. Like we've just done now about 4 times to your poor listeners.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I'm much more comfortable with that as opposed to, and I won't trigger your Amazon Echo folks with that phrase. But I've noticed that I start to think about where I've positioned the Echo in my house, and so that maybe can't overhear everything. And probably nobody's doing anything with it. You think about the amount of data that would be coming in. It's not really realistic to believe that anybody's eavesdropping on you.
It's like
I wouldn't put that same faith in Amazon that I do in Apple.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, not at all. It's like having young kids now. You have to spell everything out if you don't want Alexa to know what you're saying.
And I tell you, Facebook Messenger, it absolutely does, I think, listen all the time. Sometimes I share an office with another person here, and he had Facebook Messenger, and we were talking about something really esoteric, and lo and behold, like within a couple minutes, some ads started showing up, for what we were talking about. So that was a little creepy. Yeah.
Wait, Google using your information to deliver ads?
No, this is Facebook.
Oh, Facebook. Sorry.
Yeah.
Not a huge, better feeling about either of those two.
Yeah, the devil or the deep blue sea. Take your choice.
Yeah.
Take your choice. I don't know. I feel like this has been a really good upgrade for me, and I have not explored all the features. I mean, that's one reason I like to do the weekend shows, because you don't have a chance to get too deep, but you do pick the ones that apply to you, the way you use your computer or in this case your phone or your iPad, and those are the ones you gravitate to first. So I aside from the issues that we're hearing here about the slowdown, and I don't know, one generation back, that does seem a little bit surprising, but I'm encouraged by the fact that Chuck's experience was so smooth.
Yeah, it was, and it's a good one. Even my son has an iPhone 5, and I don't know if he's upgraded, but Dr. Robert, if I hear he's having troubles, I'll let you know.
Okay.
And then maybe we'll get your wife a 6S after all.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think generally, like I said before, not a lot of whole whiz-bang features, but a ton of little nuanced improvements that just work together to make things work easier. There's nothing sexy about low power mode, but I love it. it works terrifically, right? I mean, it really extends the life of your phone. There's nothing really that you're going to want to post on Twitter about Wi-Fi assist, but it's a good feature. If you're in an area with spotty Wi-Fi, but your phone's connected to it and locked into it, it'll now sense that it's not a great connection, and it'll use your cellular data to improve, whatever you're doing on the phone.
That is a very
brilliant.
Worthwhile feature, yes. Agreed.
Two things I want to make sure we just touch on, because they were sort of a big deal, I thought, at least in the pre-release stuff. The first one is the new notes. Has anybody experimented with the new notes? And obviously we don't have El Capitan yet unless you are running a beta. But the idea of being able to sync, there's Chuck's waving. The idea of being able to sync notes back and forth and having this be something a little closer to Evernote, and the Evernote power than just a notepad. Chuck, since you were waving, I'll let you comment.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what it is. It's nice to just be able to drag and drop things onto it. It's maps, pictures, anything you want. It's nice to be able to doodle onto it, sketch style. It's also nice to be able to make checklists, which at first I thought, well, I have reminders for that, but it's really a different kind of list. This is more of a camping checklist to make sure I packed properly, or a grocery list so I can check off items as I go down, and that's different from a reminder. And it's easy to do, and I can do it on my desktop where it's easier to type and bang things out, and then I know I have it on my phone when I'm in the grocery store. Because of the syncing. So like I said before, it's not a huge feature. It's not a marquee feature, but it's a really nice touch that helps to make the whole general experience better.
John, notes?
I agree. Yes. I didn't get a whole lot of time to use the new Notes app, but I saw in the keynote, and I definitely, that was one of the things that I thought was, pretty brilliant. That's definitely the direction to take that app in.
Mm-hmm. Robert, is Notes something that we use the way you use your iPhone and iPad?
Absolutely. And I haven't played with it a whole lot, but I really liked the ease of use of the checklist. I think they will come in very handy. And Apple said, I think in the keynote or somewhere, that the Notes feature was very popular with iOS users. So I'm just thinking as people get into it more, people are going to love it, especially if they were already accustomed to using Notes anyway. It's so much more feature rich now.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to make sure we touched on, and I know we talked about iCloud from a backup perspective earlier, but iCloud Drive, I played with that quite a bit because the idea of having more storage online so that I can move things back and forth or always have them available does appeal to me. And so far, it seems to be working very, very well, at least as good as Dropbox and Transporter. So now I've got three very nice cloud services that I'm feeling secure with. iCloud, still going to be just a little bit cautious about that because let's face it, the history of iCloud has not been all that great. So, Robert, are you trying iCloud Drive, or do you have a use for iCloud Drive?
Yeah, and I am thrilled, honestly. I say hallelujah that we now have the ability to access our files through the app. For people who don't know, you do have to go in and make the app visible in iCloud. It's kind of hidden when you first install iOS 9, but as long as you check the checkbox to show iCloud Drive on your phone, then you get a nice little app that shows you all your files that are in the cloud. And I found that it worked really well. I was very happy with it, honestly.
Chuck, iCloud Drive?
It's where I want. It stays invisible for me for the most part. I like it, but it's one of those things that I don't think a whole lot about. That is where I store all my documents from my keynote pages and numbers documents. I just take it for granted that they're going to be there when I close my laptop and open up my iPad. But I don't use the file system itself for iCloud Drive because I have become so ingrained in Dropbox and OneCloud, which is the open source solution I talked about earlier.
Interesting that you have adopted what was iCloud before is now iCloud Drive for keynote numbers pages.
Yep.
And it worked flawlessly for you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's just where they went by default, even before iCloud Drive became, when it was still just iCloud. And I haven't changed anything in that workflow. So they're all there. I mean, now if I want, I can go navigate through the folders to get to those documents, but I still tend to just do them within the apps.
See, that was the killer for me, is I like the idea that I knew where they were going by default, but the fact that I couldn't get to them, I guess maybe I'm just still too little ingrained in the old way of having it in, say, your documents folder or somewhere where you can go and look at it, as opposed to having it buried deep somewhere hidden.
Yeah, it wasn't a big deal to me because I'm only going to open up a Numbers app in Numbers, and that's going to show up for me within the app. So it didn't really, I guess my workflow didn't need to change.
John?
Since I'm still on 10.6.8, I'm using Dropbox, and have been for a long time. So, at some point, when I'm off of 10.6.8, if whenever that happens, certainly entertain the iCloud drive. But I mean, Dropbox works so well. It is so inexpensive.
It's a real challenge because we've all become used to the way that Dropbox works. So this is the way it, quote unquote, should work.
That's why it drives me nuts that Apple didn't just buy Dropbox and not go through all these, horrible, this nightmare that iCloud became for a while.
Yeah.
I think didn't they want to, but the Dropbox folks,
they decided they wanted to go another way, and good for them. I mean, it's too bad because it would have been a great addition to the Apple ecosystem, but it may also be a good thing that we have somebody out there as a third party doing it.
iCloud, Maps, Apple just likes to do it themselves.
Yeah.
and sometimes to their detriment, but usually, it may take an iteration or two, but it gets to be pretty good. I think Maps, I haven't really noticed a difference in Maps with iOS 9, at least so far.
Well, we have transit directions now. That was a very big deal if you're in an area that uses them.
Yeah.
Limited rollout.
For us out the sticks, not so much.
I still miss the first Maps app we had on iOS. Nothing, I don't think, has come close yet.
Well, you can still have it with Google.
Well, sort of, right?
You can have both.
It's just not quite the same, though. I mean, the interface was just so beautiful. I do that is one of the apps I really, really miss.
Forgive me, John. I'm not sure what you're referring to. What just
the first Maps app was sort of a collaboration between Apple and Google, and I think it had like a lot of the Apple UI,
right?
And it had, used the Google Map engine. And you had driving, public transit, walking directions. Wow. It was just a very, very well done application. I mean, one of the best. I mean, I definitely put it up there in the top 1%. I mean, the whole thing was just it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful, very useful. And we're just, none of the solutions available now even come close, I don't think.
Well, folks, that's our look at the first weekend with iOS 9. Obviously, we all have a lot more research to do and experimentation to do. I know I'm looking forward to doing more of it, but I'm going to be really busy because now, again, as we record this, watchOS is out. We have new iPhones coming. Then there'll be the iPad Pro. Then there'll be the Apple TV.
Can I interject something about the watch?
Sure, John.
Just get your guys' opinion.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the round, nameless icons on the watch?
Well, what else could you do, I think, would be my question.
Well, here's my biggest gotcha with these things is, as more and more watch apps are being released, it's really hard to tell what those icons are.
So my recommendation is don't put so many apps on your phone. and it sounds snarky, but it's really not. watchOS 2 may change this to a certain extent, but to me, people who try to turn the Apple Watch into an iPhone on your wrist are making a mistake because that's not what it's for. I think it's much more selective than that. So I became much happier once I pared down the apps on my watch a lot.
But couldn't that whole situation be avoided by simply labeling the icons and let's make them square like iOS?
Square and a round watch. It's like you don't even know Apple.
Yeah.
No. Square on a rectangular watch.
And I'm trying to figure out,
Yes.
John, how you would realistically label them given the screen size.
Well, let's say you had, do you remember the iPod Nano? You know, it had a screen not much bigger than the watch. And there was some apps that it had. And actually, the icons were round, but they had labels. I foresee a day, you know, when it's really hard to differentiate these icons, you know, and I find myself now, it's like, all right, what app is that? You know, I mean, it's a green icon with a lightning bolt, and wow, that looks a lot like the Zillow app, but I know that's not Zillow, you know. I just see it as a pain point, you know, and if you know, we want to do more with the watch and have more apps, and, you know, I mean, sure, you know, you can pare things down, but I don't know. I'm not in love with.
You can also use Siri to open apps if you want.
Yeah, and there's even another solution too, which obviously you wouldn't like because it introduces other issues. But for the most part, I've found the watch to be very accessible with VoiceOver, and it will read the names of every one of those icons. So you could just turn your Apple Watch into a talking watch and have VoiceOver speak that information for you.
That's an interesting idea. I guess, John, yeah, I've kind of come to like the icons. Chuck's point was the one I would have made that point if he hadn't, because one mistake I think Apple did make is, and I made it when I got my watch and said, okay, you know, let's just load everything on there, and then all of a sudden it's like I've got this forest of icons, and it is a problem. So the only other thing I can think of is that you would implement a list mode.
I just like to see like 4 up on the icons, or maybe 6, and have some labels, and you could use the crown, or you could just you know, flick up and down. But I don't know.
That might work.
Yeah.
That might work.
Yeah, somebody will, you know, if Apple doesn't, there'll probably be a utility at some point.
All right, I just want to gauge your guys' opinion on that.
So if we're done, there's only one thing left on my list. Can I read it off as a tip?
Of course, Chuck.
Because
please.
it's something that I hadn't discovered for a while, and something that was very welcome to me. iOS 9 now lets you leave a message on FaceTime if the person is not available for chat.
Nice.
So
Cool.
me,
I didn't know that.
No.
With 3 kids in 3 different cities going to college, you know, we like to FaceTime a lot.
Sure.
And they're not always around, and, you know, we would have to rely on them to try to catch them or hope that they saw the recent calls. Now, if they're not available, there's an extra icon at the bottom of the screen that says leave a message, and you can do that there.
I did not know that one.
And that just goes to their voicemail or what?
I don't know where it goes.
It must be like a
it's interesting.
FaceTime voice.
I think it's a notification within FaceTime. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that, Chuck, I think you were the one that made the point. There's so many little things here. You know, none of them are going to be that killer feature that's going to say, okay, I'm now going to buy an iPhone for iOS 9. But they're just a lot of little conveniences, and I'm to the point now where I think that may be one of the best ways if you can throw 1 or 2 new features, big features in, but just refine the little things.
Yep, I agree. And it's over 50% adoption as we record this.
Yeah, and that's and we are recording this 2.5 days after release.
Yeah,
is that about right? So 50% in 2.5 days. I think that says a lot about the future of Apple and the confidence that folks have in Apple.
Yep. Absolutely.
So.
You guys just gave me a great idea for kids. I'll just share it with you.
Okay.
When you text your kids or call them, I mean, if you're paying for that phone, how about, you know, you can set it up so nothing works on that phone until they, you know, respond to you first. Wouldn't that be great?
That.
Yeah.
That's great.
Something tells me that might kill the market for the kids. You know, the parents might love it, but
I think they, you know, I mean, hey, they're going to reply. They're not going to go without using that phone.
And every 10 minutes that they delay responding, a new feature dies.
There you go.
I think it's time to put an end to this. This is going in a disturbing direction. Robert, thanks so much for being here. It's great to have you for the first time. I hope you'll come back.
I will, Chuck. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
John, next time we want to see you, not just hear you.
Sounds good. I'm all for that.
And Chuck, as always, thanks so much. I'm keeping that journalistic endeavor thing in the back of my mind.
Okay, we'll talk more later.
Sounds good. Folks, this is the MacJury on MacVoices. Thanks so much for joining us for our first weekend with iOS 9. We hope you will join us again for more soon. As always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting MacVoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.